the class if they were to, I guess they started today, you said? So how long is that class?
It's 17 weeks.
17 weeks. So after 17 weeks, they're firefighters, or after 17 weeks, well, then what?
Mr. President, after 17 weeks, they are firefighter second classes within the department.
Okay, so 17 weeks, which is more or less 4 months, almost exactly. And what about laterals? How long does it take to hire laterals? How difficult would it be to hire 15 laterals?
Probably 12 to 16, well, 12 weeks probably. It depends on the skill sets that they're coming in with.
But we pay more than Torrance County, don't we?
Mr. President, we probably do.
We pay more than Rio Rancho, correct?
Yes, sir.
We pay more than Bernalillo County?
We do.
Yeah, we can get these 15 people on board then, couldn't we?
We'd have to go back and look at what that would look like. There's always that possibility, but we haven't done the contingency planning for that or the recruitment for it. Keep in mind that you'd be drawing from other communities as well.
Okay. Didn't we, but Councilor Lewis just reminded me of something. Didn't you ask Councilor Lewis to defer it at the end of June? This is on the end of the June meeting. This is on the last meeting at the last meeting in June, isn't it?
Mr. President, the request was to defer based on the final negotiations of the fuel hedge fund. So, but certainly was at the request of the administration and certainly our staff also. And I think it was a smart idea. But okay, that's what happened.
We kind of got pinned into one meeting only. So I mean, the notion that it was on the agenda since June, but then there was also a request to defer it until the first meeting in August. And then the first meeting in August didn't happen, so the second meeting in August was like, oh, too late. So I think that's why some folks here are a little concerned that it almost seems like we're sort of pinned on one meeting and it just sort of vanished. Anyway, Councilor Winter?
Thank you, Mr. President. Chief, I know that you've met with some councilors regarding what you wanted to see done with this money. Since we did miss this, I know you've got a plan for how we're going to get those officers and that ladder truck done. Can you please give the plan that you have in mind that you want to see what to do with this money now?
Well, it turns out that Mr. President, Councilor Winter, it turns out that the funding for Stations 2, the rebuild of Stations 2 and 7 are short collectively by $600,000. And we've already shrunk the footprint of the building. We've removed some of the aesthetic characteristics of the building. It's still a fine fire station, but we're short funding for both projects. And without that funding, Station 2 will be a 2-bay station, originally designed as a 3-bay for future growth and expansion for that area. Along with Station 7, if we don't get the $300,000 to pay for that third bay, the project will have to be canceled. These are both great public safety projects that should be funded, that will add the quality of service, not only to the service gap that exists in the Southeast Heights near Gibson and University, but it will allow for that Ladder 7 to be put in place. It also allows for an increase in emergency service redundancy. There's only 4 units that are west of the city and that are south of I-40, 4 units. And by adding that ladder company, it adds for that system redundancy that we'd like to see to maintain our response times.
Mr. President, if I could just be heard, and I don't mean to further complicate the situation, but in the future building plans of providing gap coverage for fire protection gaps also is the Station 2, which is, of course, the university area, and the station that's planned on Gibson Boulevard. Part of the funding for these stations is the impact fee monies, and of course they have to be spent by the end of the year. And we have EC 11535, which is the land exchange agreement for the land, whereby we will be obtaining the land down in the Southeast Heights on Gibson Boulevard for Station 2 in exchange for the land on 4th Street. Well, we had asked for, we had inquired about the possibility of immediate action on that. And it was thought that maybe it was best not to proceed with immediate action. But now we're looking at a time frame where just the land swap agreement itself is going to the September meeting. And since we're going to be on such a time frame and a source of that funding could expire the end of the year, we're in a bad situation where we're running up on a clock on that project as well, which could compromise these fire station constructions. And I just want to make sure that I am on the record that I'm pointing out that time is of the essence. And I know there's some issues that are related to the land swap agreement in the 4th Street and things like that. But it's important to recognize that that could compromise fire protection and gap coverage in Albuquerque as well. So we've got three issues. We've got the land swap agreement that deals with expiration of the federal funding. We have the issues of the personnel that's before the council in the instant legislation. And then we have the issue regarding the over cost of construction and about Mike Reardon tells me I think it was closer to about $550,000 opposed to $600 for the shortages for Station 2 and 7.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Perry. I think Councilor Winter has some more comments.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chief Breen, so do you have a plan to hire these 15 firefighters that we're talking about in this bill in the future?
Mr. President, Councilor Winter, the FY13 was going to include an appropriation for a growth cadet class, so that we could put that personnel and that truck in service at the end of it'd be December of 12 when the station was completed, and that was the plan based on the FY12 budget. So the plan has always been in place to increase the service. The West Side Ladder has always been in place. It's just a matter of this appropriation was going to make that happen sooner.
Thank you, Councilor Winter. Councilor O'Malley, then Councilor Garduno.
Thank you, Mr. President. We've got some scheduling issues here and some real problems in terms of deadlines. And I just want to, on the record, about the issue of the land swap between, for the District 2 fire station, the Southeast Heights. We've been working on this for months now. And we were asked, the last council, I believe it was this council meeting, that the administration asked for immediate action on that land swap. I've been working with the community for the last several months on this issue because we're trading property on 4th Street that was paid with HUD funds that was scheduled to be possibly senior housing. But in understanding that the UNM wanted that site for a clinic, and of course there was strong opposition to a clinic because there was the idea that there was going to be a methadone clinic there. Worked with the neighborhood for the last several months to deal with this issue. And all of a sudden we get this request for immediate action. And I want to make it very clear that until that contract with UNM states what was that UNM promised in terms of with the neighborhood, no methadone clinic, that it was going to follow the 4th Street plan, etc., I'm not going to support it. And we've had months to work on this. And all of a sudden at the last minute you guys come through and say, we need this for immediate action because we might lose some funds. I didn't hear that. I didn't know that was going on. You need to get your act together.
Thank you, Councilor Miller. Councilor Sanchez and Councilor Garduno.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Zaman, we talked earlier today regarding trying to find other appropriations for Stations 2 and Station 7. I know that Councilor Benton and myself and this entire council has worked in collaboration in getting these fire stations built, and also the administration. Are we going to be able to find the funds necessary to build and complete Stations 2 and 7, because I was kind of concerned regarding some of the statements that there's the potential of canceling building, these stations.
Mr. President, Councilor Sanchez, I don't have any doubt that we'll be able through state grants that have already been appropriated, to MR funds, through other sources of capital funding. I don't have any doubt that we'll be able to find money to fund both Fire Station 7 and Fire Station 2 completely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Garduno?
President?
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Mr. Perry.
I'd like to know if that includes the expiration of the impact fees, if Mr. Zaman's opinion remains the same, because we have kind of a hard deadline on that.
Mr. Zaman, and the expiration, is that the fiscal year or the calendar year end?
Mr. President, it's my understanding that it's the end of calendar year 2012. But the issue in this case would be spending the impact fee money and putting the project in place by the end of FY or calendar year 2012.
Now, do you have to actually spend the entire project have to be finished, or does
Mr.
that
President, I'm going
document
to
have
defer this to Mr. Romero, who's our expert in impact fees.
Mr. President and councilors, under the Development Fees Act, which is the enabling legislation for our impact fees, you have to have the facility in service within 7 years of collecting of those impact fees, and you have to spend the money within 7 years. or you run the risk of having to refund it to the developers. It sort of gets problematic in looking at what you've accumulated within 7 years versus what you collect that first year, 2005, which is really when the clock starts, and you just have to make sure you spend what you collected in 2005 first. You could also stagger the project expenditures so that you spend the impact fee money first and wipe that out in land or planning or development costs, whatever goes up front before the actual bricks and mortar. So the spending, in my mind, is not an issue. It's whether or not you can get the facility serving new development to accommodate growth by the end of calendar year 2012.
So the has to be actually in service by the end of calendar year 2012?
That's correct.
Okay. Councilor Garduno, and then Councilor Benton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a couple of questions for you, Chief Breen. Last time, how many folks applied for cadet class? Do you know? It was more than the cadet class could accommodate.
Mr. President, Councilor Garduno, probably 80 to 90 people were eligible after the process.
Mm-hmm. So do we have another way of accommodating those folks to bring them online? Can we have cohort classes?
Mr. President, Councilor Garduno, I don't have the resources to do two simultaneous classes back-to-back or side-to-side. I don't have the resources or the equipment to do that.
And you can't even do staggered, if you will, classes?
No, sir.
So you start with a class, and until that class is finished, you can't start another class?
That's correct.
And you've never hired off schedule, let's say, before? In other words, you have to wait till that cadet class is over before you hire, or can you hire, as it's been suggested, from other places? Put out a recruitment flyer, if you will.
Mr. President, Councilor Garduno, these are great ideas. I'd love to do this, but the bottom line is I don't have the internal resources and instructors or additional equipment to make that happen. And not only that, a lateral class, as you call it, we'd have to develop the curriculum for that. We don't have that in place.
And have we hired folks while a class is going on?
Mr. President, Councilor Garduno, not to my knowledge, no.
Why haven't we? If we have folks that are trained, ready to come to work, why can't we hire them?
Mr. President, Councilor Garduno, these people are not trained. That's the purpose of the cadet program, is to put them through.
I'm not talking about people that are going to go into cadet class. I'm talking about folks who have been trained either locally, regionally, or somehow have the qualifications that you would require.
Mr. President, Councilor Garduno, there's local procedures, and every fire department, although the training is similar, they have to be indoctrinated into the AFD standard operating guidelines, the ones that we use to operate. Every department does it this way. It would be, we don't have a direct hire on-the-job type training program. And the reason for that is we like consistency in operations. We like our firefighters to be safe, and providing them with consistent department training that everyone receives results in a well-rounded firefighter that's safe on the fire ground for high-risk operations.
And your cadet classes are the only way to guarantee that these folks are trained in the way you want them trained? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Mr. President, Councilor Garduno, every fire department has its own indoctrination program or cadet program.